In a previous episode of Journey with Murphy, we explored the San Pasqual battlefield out near Escondido, California. Now, just to give you a little recap, that battle was fought between December 6th and 10th, 1846, as part of the Mexican-American War. And I'm not quite done with that subject. Today I'm here at Mule Hill and Mule Hill Trail, just outside Escondido, and this actually played an important part within the battle. A lot of the fighting that took place on December 6th, 1846 did take place in San Pasqual Valley, where we previously visited. The Battle of San Pasqual was really sort of a running battle that headed west-southwest, and here on Mule Hill is where the Americans were pinned down by Californios. And it's actually from this site that Kit Carson and others snuck out and went down to San Diego to get American forces and reinforcements. Now, there's a lot of bugs zipping about, and it's also about, I think it's 97 degrees out, it's almost 100 out. And maybe as expected, I'm the only person on the trail right now, which is fine. But I've never been on this trail before. I have been told that there are some cool interpretive signs that talk all about the Battle of San Pasqual. So we're going to keep going down it, kind of avoid some of these bugs, hopefully avoid getting sunburned, and yeah, we'll see what we see. Just heard a couple loud noises and thought I was under siege, but if you look here, you can actually see there are dozens and dozens of golf balls. I think there's actually a driving range just on the other side. Which would kind of explain why they have this fence here to protect anybody walking by. But yeah, it sounded like coconuts were falling or something. So as I head down the trail, this is Mule Hill. Not very big, but it is a somewhat prominent, geographical feature in this area. And again, it was in those later days of the battle, December 9th, 10th, where the American forces were pinned down here. They were basically surrounded and laid siege to by the Californios, who had them surrounded. And again, today it kind of looks just like a small little hill you almost wouldn't notice, but then this was potentially the last moments of the American army. Had Kit Carson and Edward Beale and their scout not snuck past Californio lines and went on to San Diego to get American reinforcements. One really neat thing about this site here at Mule Hill is that for decades and decades after the battle, we did not actually know that this was the site where General Kearny and his men were penned down from December 7th to 10th, 1846. In fact, it was debated for many years about what the exact location was, which hill it was, which rocky outcropping, based on first-hand accounts. They weren't exactly sure where it was. And it wasn't until people started to find some artifacts here at this site and in this area, such as, military buckles and military gear and equipment that dated to the 1840s and that time where the U.S. Dragoons would have had. So it's kind of interesting to think, like anything with archaeology, we can use these artifacts that are found to date an area to determine where things are, where things happen. And that kind of made me think, I'm sure there's nothing really here today. I'm sure treasure hunters have come with metal detectors and cleared it out. But it made me think of, recent news where at the North Bridge in Concord, they found and discovered some more musket balls, which further helps us understand what played out there on April 19th, 1775. So, who knows, maybe there's something out here. I'm not going to be looking for it, but it's just kind of a cool thought to know that, anywhere you're at, any trail you might be, or battlefield or site, there could be anything, maybe just a few inches or feet beneath the ground that might tell us a little bit more about the history of that story. And it looks like here is one of our first interpretive signs on Mule Hill Trail. And it says that this is the start of the engagement, December 7th, 1846. Late in the evening, when we had arrived within about 400 yards of the water where we intended to camp, they charged us, coming on in two bodies and compelling us to retreat to a pile of rocks, about 200 yards away on our left. After we had gained this position, the Californians took their stand on another hill, about 100 yards farther to our left, and opened fire on us. Captain Emery and Captain Turner assumed command of our dragoons and charged the enemy, routing them and gaining possession, which we held throughout the night. And that is from Kit Carson's autobiography. And here on this sign, we actually see a pretty interesting map that shows you where we are. So we're right here where that little red dot is. And of course here you can see the hill and some of the positions of the military and some other routes and movements of troops that took place between December 7th and December 10th, 1846. And of course, it's a little scratched out here, but this was a portrait of Kit Carson, the famous explorer and scout, again, who wrote down this quote from his autobiography. And just to give you a little perspective, up here we see the San Pasqual Battlefield State Park, which we explored in a previous video of Journey with Murphy. And west-southwest of that position is where we are now, here at the position of Mule Hill, again, where the Americans were pinned down later in the battle between December 7th and 10th. And it's hard to kind of tell when you're stopping by these sites, but it really kind of became a running battle after December 6th as the Americans continued to move towards San Diego, but again were surrounded, which necessitated some of the Americans, Kit Carson, Edward Beale, and a scout, to basically sneak past and head on to San Diego for reinforcements, which ultimately did come and save the Americans that were here. Anytime I go to historic sites or battlefields, like Gettysburg and such, where you see these big boulders, these big rocks, I always thought that's neat because, these were there at the time of that historic event. These exact boulders, these rocks, sure, some things may have changed or shifted slightly over time, but in reality, this was here at the time of the battle. So who knows who might have used these rocks to, hide themselves and kind of take cover behind, who might have used them to move behind and come up this hill. Did the Californios use this spot right here, going rock to rock and stone to stone, to get up further up the hill and closer to the American lines? I don't know, but it's kind of cool to be here, see features like this that we're here at the time of the battle, and just kind of let your mind run wild and have some imagination to kind of imagine and think what this battle might have been like for the men that were here at that time. And right up here, it looks like we have a few more of those interpretive signs about the fighting that took place here. This is neat. So here it's talking about the Mule Hill standoff. So this sign here explains how on December 7th, the American soldiers and sailors and volunteers under command of General Kearny were actually attacked from the rear about 250 yards northwest of this spot, and this ultimately compelled the Americans to fall back to a higher location, which was here on Mule Hill and these rises we see behind these signs. And an important note here, on December 11th, 100 sailors and 80 Marines from San Diego sent by Commodore Stockton arrived as reinforcements and ultimately helped the Americans to come out of their position at Mule Hill and march back to what is now Old Town San Diego. One other interesting fact about this battle and this site is the name itself, Mule Hill. This name actually came from that day, or those days here. The Americans were so short on food that they ultimately resorted to eating their mules, hence the name Mule Hill for this site. I thought I'd finish up my time visiting the actual final resting place of the Americans who were killed in the Battle of San Pasqual. Now, after the battle, they were actually initially buried along the banks of the San Pasqual Creek. But a few decades after the battle, they were actually reinterred and brought to Point Loma, just outside of San Diego, California. And, at the time, they were buried here kind of hastily, and there was a marker, though, so we knew they were here. And that was around 1874 that they were moved here, so just under 30 years after the battle. Which, if you think about it, I'm sure the battle was fresh in everyone's mind. Maybe that's why they were thinking about that. Perhaps there were some relatives that were still living out here, that had a loved one who died in the battle. So they were moved here in about 1874, and then in 1882, when this officially became a military post and cemetery, they were reinterred nearby here also on Point Loma. And then in 1922, they actually took a stone, a boulder from the San Pasqual battlefield and brought it here to make a new marker out of it for the men who died. So today we're here at now known as Fort Rosencrans National Cemetery to visit the resting place of these men. Now, if you've seen my video on the Mormon Battalion, you know we've actually visited Fort Rosencrans National Cemetery before. And what's interesting is the grave of the men who died in the Battle of San Pasqual is actually right next to the monument dedicated to a few of the people who died during the March of the Mormon Battalion. And again, here we see a boulder taken from the battlefield and placed here as a marker in 1922. And on the front is this bronze tablet that reads, "In memory of the heroes of the Battle of San Pasqual. They fought a good fight." And listed are the men who were killed during the battle. And here at the bottom it reads, "The Battle of San Pasqual fought December 6th to December 10th, 1846. Won California from Mexico for the United States of America." And that's kind of an interesting comment because, most people argue that the Americans lost this battle. And ultimately, whether, you say that the Californio, so the Americans won the battle, it was fairly inconsequential to the result of the Mexican-American War. But anyway, it reads, "This stone was taken from the San Pasqual battlefield and erected over their last resting place by the San Diego parlors of native sons and daughters of the Golden West, 1922. And as mentioned, right next to it, you will see the monument dedicated to two people, a man and a woman, who died during the Mormon Battalion's march out west, which ultimately ended here in San Diego. And this one also has a placard here on the ground. Says, "In memory of the Mormon Battalion, whose members made the longest military march in U.S. history, over 2,000 miles from Iowa to San Diego in 1846 to 1847, during the war with Mexico." And of note, if you think about those years, the Battle of San Pasqual took place in December of 1846. So it is quite interesting that you can visit here. And as mentioned, you can come here and see both of these monuments right next to each other. Interesting bit of American history that, of course, a lot of folks don't really know and certainly don't take the time to study. And if you ever get a chance to visit Fort Rosencrans National Cemetery, I highly recommend it. It is a massive cemetery, mostly military graves and family members of the military. Multiple service members who earned the Medal of Honor are laid to rest here. And of course, the views themselves are just stunning. Well, that's all I have for you folks in regards to the Battle of San Pasqual, and I really do hope to bring you some more videos all about the Mexican-American War, specifically as it pertains to Southern California. But with that, it's on to the next journey.